This kind of place made me want to puke. I needed a real drink to deal with the electronic music and the robotic people.
Anyone that's played Max Payne 3 can tell you that it's a pretty unique game. You know, there aren't a whole lot of games like Max Payne 3, and while I think a direct comparison between it and Assassin's Creed 4 isn't really apt or possible, at the same time, everything that Max Payne 3 does right is something that Assassin's Creed 4 really struggles with or completely fails at. And what I mean by that is detail. You know, Assassin's Creed 4, and I've said this before, it feels like 1,000 people made one game without collaborating on any specific part of it. You know, it feels like there are all these really great ideas floating around in Assassin's Creed, you know, the naval battles, the assassination stuff, the combat, the free running, that are there and are really good on their own, but don't work together in a way that's really interesting or dynamic or lends itself to enhancing the gameplay experience overall. And not just, you know, the running around doing stuff, but also in the story. Because I feel like part of what developers have failed to realize about games is that the story isn't just the story, it's part of the gameplay. And if you can interweave the two as well as a game like Max Payne 3 did, you really achieve something that's special and unique. What makes Max Payne 3 cool is that not only is the story interesting and the character development's cool, but it intertwines with the gameplay. You know, everything from the little details of how Max Payne 3 holds his weapons and moves and stuff, to the cutscenes that they interweave in between the gun battles and the moments here and there in the game. The way it all works together, it makes it so that the storyline is part of the gameplay experience. You know, you feel bad for Max Payne. You feel his emotions and you feel his motivations and you understand where he's coming from and you can relate to him. And it's more than just a compelling story. You know, The Last of Us had a very compelling story, but the gameplay was kind of just mediocre. I think overall, a lot of people, they agree that the gameplay was really simplistic and sort of buggy, and while it was fun, it wasn't really interesting or didn't really enhance the experience all that much. You know, there are definitely parts where the gameplay design, like the scene with Ellie hunting in the forest during the winter, that's a really interesting gameplay experience, but the core gameplay mechanics themselves are kind of clunky and whatever. So when games like Max Payne 3 manage to strike a balance between gameplay design and story design and presentation, and then find a way to kind of coalesce them all into one experience, you're left with a game that's really fun to play. And that's what I would like to see more of in video games and in the video game industry. Not just games that are deep and intellectual and challenge the player more, because I feel like game design has gone from challenging to corridor shooter over the past few years, but also in presentation and design and story, because there is so much potential in a video game to do whatever you want from both a gameplay and story perspective, that to impose limits on yourself by making it an overly simplistic corridor shooter, it's just ridiculous to me at this point. You know, there is nothing stopping anyone from making an incredibly interesting game like Max Payne 3. Yeah, maybe you don't have the budget to create the resources needed to make a game that looks as good, but you can certainly make a game that plays as good or has as compelling a story, and the gameplay design of which kind of lends itself to those things that make them all come together and be incredibly interesting. So the point I want to make here is simply that developers need to look at Max Payne 3 and go, how can we do games like this but better? How can we make gameplay experiences that are as fun as Max Payne 3 but add a challenge to them, or make them more dynamic and make it so that players aren't just being handheld through explosions and corridors, but are actually playing and having a valuable impact on the gameplay experience and the storyline. You know, the Mass Effect series, I think, is a kind of a good example of this, in that your actions up until at least the third game really have a significant impact on how the game actually plays. But overall, I feel like not enough games recognize how important a thing that is in gameplay design, and we're left with corridor shooters like Battlefield 4, where you're playing follow the leader even though the game says that you're the leader. Battlefield 4's China Rising DLC has been released for Battlefield 4 Premium members on PC, and as one of those players, I have had the opportunity to play them, and I have to say, they are fantastic maps. Now, there are a couple issues that I want to talk about regarding DLC and Battlefield 4 in general that I think equate to whether or not you should buy China Rising if you haven't already paid for Premium or bought it as a standalone DLC pack. But first things first, what do you get with the DLC? I think that's kind of an important thing to talk about, right? Silk Road, Altai Range, Gulian Peaks, and Dragon Pass are the names of the 4 maps that you get in this DLC. Silk Road is the flat, wide open desert map, which plays fantastically well, which I'll talk about later. Altai Range is sort of a mountaintop level, and if you like goat herding, it's for you. Gulian Peaks is the interwoven cave system map that has wide open rice paddies that is also cool, but I don't really know how to describe it because it's a fantastic map, but it's kind of weird. And Dragon Pass, which is more or less in the mountain valley style map with lots of wide open spaces and really high mountaintops that have a really weird problem with player clipping and stuff that I think, or at least hope, that DICE addresses really quickly because it's a problem. But so, should you buy these maps, and why or why not? Well, one of the problems with Battlefield 4 is that they gave everyone something that explodes right off the bat in each class, and because of that, it's really promoted this idea of Johnny Rambo, where every player feels like a badass that can blow anything up because they have something that explodes. And so teamwork in Battlefield 4, especially considering the fact that VoIP is limited to squads, doesn't really exist in a random playing with randoms environment. You know, unless you're playing with your friends, you're really not guaranteed to be put on a team with competent team players. You know, most people are just kind of playing to get kills and unlock weapons, especially because right now, you know, everyone's playing these maps because they have premium and not because they just bought the game. So there's sort of an incentive to get DLC and unlock new weapons and level up quickly because the new maps are out. But overall, Battlefield 4 really lacks sort of a strong team play component, even though the foundation for one is totally there. You know, anyone that has good friends that are competent team players can really get a lot of bang for their buck in terms of teamwork out of BF4. You know, there is a lot of teamwork that is possible in BF4. The problem is it doesn't encourage that teamwork. Now, the bigger issue is that this DLC doesn't push players to play as a team. You know, it doesn't bring a new game mode that's really team-centric or team-oriented that forces players to play as a team or get decimated without a doubt. And game modes like Capture the Flag and stuff really sort of elevated Battlefield 3's DLC to a new level where it encouraged new dynamics and gameplay and teamwork above all else. And so while you might not like Capture the Flag, it being an objective that was hard to get because it, you know, you could defend the flag areas was a big thing, and it really encouraged people to play together. Now, the other thing, and this is something that these maps have addressed and done quite well, I might add, is the idea of big map, not a lot of action. Armored Kill for BF3 was probably one of its worst DLCs because it just wasn't fun. You know, it was boring. There weren't a whole lot of pockets of engagement. You couldn't go into it expecting to get into a gunfight if you were in a given area on the map, and so they kind of just played like vehicle unlock horror maps. You know, like if you wanted to get lots of vehicle kills against other vehicles, Armored Kill was were the maps for you. And of course, that was kind of what they were designed to do, but at the same time, even in the infantry-based game modes, it still felt like you were in this wide-open map with random cover everywhere that was kind of arbitrary and just didn't lend itself to fun and these pockets of engagement that you could rely on to exist. China Rising, despite the fact that these maps are open, have a very distinct and noticeable flow to them that encourages players to move in specific patterns across the map, which makes pockets of engagement possible. And it's one of the reasons why Gulian Peaks is probably my favorite map of all 4 of them, because it's a cave system, essentially speaking. You know, the center of the map is a big cave system, and owning the point in the middle of the map gives you a really advantageous spawn point, and yet getting it is really hard because it's a cave system. It's like Operation Lockers, but in a cave and with a whole exterior thing that's on like a whole nother level than Operation Locker is on. So overall, I feel like the action and the fast-pacedness of China Rising is really good, and DICE has really struck a great balance between big map design and infantry combat. That said, should you buy this DLC? Given all of the controversy surrounding Battlefield 4 and DICE pushing other DLC releases back to focus on bug fixing, I think it's questionable whether or not you should buy it. If you are frustrated with how BF4 plays right now, do not buy this DLC because it will do nothing to improve on that experience. It's not going to bring any sort of revolutionary bug fix that makes the game play well, because that's something that DICE needs to do independent of the DLC release. But if you are still finding a way to enjoy BF4 and you're still playing with friends and you're still having a good time, China Rising makes a great addition to the game that will really breathe a lot of fresh air into the map gameplay experience, because vanilla map fatigue sets in the first couple of months and we're already kind of tired of the regular maps, and so the new maps have a lot to offer and they're a lot of fun to play, and if you can get over the bugs in BF4, I recommend you pick them up. Hi guys, welcome to Nightwatch episode 1. We're going to talk about what is next gen and Battlefield 4 in this episode, so here we go. I have David Veselka and Tom of MP First with me, and for those of you that don't know about MP First, I really, you follow me on YouTube, how could you not know? It's fantastic. I work kind of, I guess, for them in some regard, and they're awesome people. So
you're part of the team.
I'm part of the team. Yeah, that's all I needed to hear. So David and Tom, why don't you guys introduce yourself and then we'll get talking.
Cool. Go ahead, Tom.
All right. Well, I'm a writer at MP First, I guess editor too. I've only been there about a year, but liking it so far. Dave's a great guy. Alex is all right. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Alex is awesome too.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been gaming pretty much. I'd say I got a Sega Genesis when I was like 5 or 6. I've been playing a lot of titles pretty much since the 16-bit era. Did miss out a little bit on the 8-bit era, but I've played PC, I've played Dreamcast, so I've definitely played a lot of games over the years.
Cool. So I am David. I manage, run, whatever MP First. I'm the boss. Yeah, and it's just, if you haven't checked it out, we like to cover primarily multiplayer gaming news with a specific focus on first-person shooters. I love first-person shooters. I play as many of them as I can, and yeah, that's kind of my jam.
That's the jam.
Yeah.
And so, because we're all gamers here, but we like to shoot people. I think it goes without saying. And as such, we've all bought BF4. And we've been playing it. And then crashing. And then crashing some more. And then crashing again. And then playing it. And then not being able to get a server. And then crashing and playing again. Yeah. So, part of what frustrates me about Battlefield 4 is that it's one of those games where like the developers are, hey, we're going to have this amazing scale. We're going to have authenticism. We're going to have vehicles and destruction and revolution and all these fancy things. But the core fundamental concept of the shooter hasn't changed since shooters were a thing, like since before GoldenEye. And that is kill. Like that is the only reason people play these games now is the pursuit of the kill. And I feel like part of this whole like next generation console thing has kind of drummed up this discussion of what is next generation? Like what does it mean to take a generational leap, not just in hardware, but in game design? And I feel like DICE was kind of like Revolution is next gen because it changes the map, which in some ways it is, but it's really just scripted destruction. And they're like, we have scale. That's next generation. Not a whole lot of previous generation games had 64 players with vehicles and all this crazy shit going on. But realistically speaking, there are games like PlanetSide 2 which have way more going on. Thousands of players. And then lastly, they're like, well, we have like a massive weapon selection and they all have unique ballistics and each individual bullet is a projectile. And I'm just like, just because you've added something in between my gun and the enemy receiving the bullets doesn't, like, it's not, it's next generational in the sense that it's doing more, but it's not next generational in the sense that it's conceptually beyond the idea of the shooter. So what are you guys' thoughts on, I guess BF4 is sort of like a next generation title, and then we'll talk about something that I feel like they could do to actually make it next generational, which is alter the concept.
Cool. Yeah, it's really tough when you take a first-person shooter that basically was established, with Doom and GoldenEye, and there are different ways you can play it. You can with a mouse and keyboard, with two thumbsticks, whatever, touchpad on your on your iPad or whatever. But it's like how do you make something like that next gen? Because as you said, like it seems right now that the only way to do that is to just add more stuff and more stuff and more stuff and keep adding more stuff on top of the core concept of a first-person shooter. And like you said, the original was, or the original idea of a shooter is just to shoot things, to kill people. So is Battlefield 4 next gen? I don't know. I'm gonna ask: is it too much to ask to completely change, the formula, or is it enough to just sort of add on some more stuff?
I think they've increased the immersion factor. Obviously, I mean, graphics will always do that for you. Sound design in the first-person genre has definitely evolved in the past decade, just exponentially. Things like Dolby surround sound and better voice acting, to name a few things. Honestly, Alex kind of alluded to this with the game design aspect. It's not I don't think this is more of a continuation of the previous generation than an evolution or a revolution, if you will, of the first person genre. I don't necessarily think what we will define as a next gen experience might even be in the first person genre. I can definitely remember a time for most of the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era that the Japanese RPGs, like games like Final Fantasy and anything that came out of Squaresoft, were kind of what was were the titles to play. I mean, GoldenEye obviously was somewhat of an aberration, because I don't really remember too many other titles in the 90s in the specific to consoles where the first person genre was really worth paying attention. I kind of remember Medal of Honor on PlayStation 1, but that wasn't it didn't have the same effect as GoldenEye did. So right now, just what Battlefield is doing, they're focusing on graphics, just focusing on adding more destruction, more vehicles, more players, more particles, just more everything. I think it's a little too soon too early in this new console cycle to kind of just have this expectation of like, oh man, the evolution of the first person shooter is here. I think it's going to take some time. It's kind of unfair to Battlefield in the sense that like the Battlefield 4 out of all the next gen titles, launch titles, I think has like the most pressure on it, because we all know it's going to have we all know it has a double the frame rate of the previous consoles. Higher player count like we've never seen on consoles before. Obviously, PC gamers have been doing it with various titles for years, but it's a good progression. I think they're just going to need to have to do a lot more next time. But honestly, fatigue is sort of setting in for me, to be honest. I just feel like we've kind of been on the same trend for the past eight or so years with the first person genre.
Yeah, so there are two things I wanted to point out. Like, one is that the reason we're talking about this, like the whole concept of next generational, isn't just because they're like these new consoles and we're like fanboying out because they're amazing, because they're not. They're mid-range hardware that should have come out like 3 years ago. But the thing is that they're hardware that developers can actually push a little bit. In fact, much more than the previous generation of hardware, which would be the Xbox 360, the PS3, the Wii, etc. And so, like, as far as next generation is concerned, I think we can establish, that these consoles, they're a leap forward, but they're not pushing the boundaries in any significant way. But at the same time, they've really opened up the doors for the possibility of game design to become next generational. And so two games that I think have really pushed the envelope in terms of next generation concepts are Titanfall and BioShock Infinite. Now, I'm not limiting like what could potentially be like the next big generational game to first person shooters, but there's two things about there's one thing about each game to me that, if applied to something like Battlefield, would really make a world of difference and really put it into a new class of game. And in Titanfall, basically the way the multiplayer is structured, it's actually like a mission-based thing where they've kind of combined the concepts from single player, which is, you know, follow the leader, secure an objective, do a thing, secure intel, whatever, and applied it to like a multiplayer arena style shooter. And so there are AI grunts that you can kill for XP boosts or in-game score boosts and stuff so that you can level up faster, and it's basically you against other people playing as the enemies. But at the same time, there's this dynamic where your team is forced to collaborate to continue the game. Like, part of the problem with, you know, first-person shooters is that nobody cares about winning or losing because it's very static. You know, it's really, you're just there for the kills, and if you win, it's sort of an added bonus. And in Titanfall, I can see the same problem happening where, you know, not securing the objective or playing the objective doesn't have a big enough impact that it will deter people from playing if they, you know, don't put a little bit of effort into it. But at the same time, I think it's sort of hinting at an evolutionary, you know, jump to something where it's like, rather than worrying about risk versus reward with players, push players to play together. And that's one of the things that, you know, Battlefield has always lacked to me, is that, you know, when you take out a chopper, you don't have to go secure the crash site. You just have to wait until the enemy chopper respawns, and you have to reload your launcher to take it out again. And like, if Battlefield had like these mini missions like Arma 3 does and GTA 5 Online does, where in addition to downing something or blowing something up or killing a high value target, you had to secure the area or acquire something, like as a team, like it required teamwork, and it gave you a huge payoff in XP or player or map position or something. Like, it would fundamentally change the concept of a game from being just about the kill to being about actually playing the game. And the other game that I mentioned, BioShock, and to a certain extent The Division, but we really don't know a whole lot about The Division, so I'm going to avoid talking about it. But The Division is much like Titanfall in that it's it's kind of teamwork story based, but it's player versus player. But BioShock Infinite, to me, really pushed the boundaries of what it meant to write a story into a game. And I think it goes without saying that the campaigns of Call of Duty and Titanfall, or not Titanfall, Call of Duty, did I say Battlefield? Battlefield,
Call of Duty and Battlefield.
Battlefield, Call of Duty, and I've been playing Assassin's Creed, and even Assassin's Creed, like, these are not interesting stories to like, they're not, like, they're interesting to play, but it's mainly because the gameplay is fun. They're not interesting in terms of, wow, that was an interesting story with emotional characters that I cared about. And Infinite, even though the gameplay was kind of static, and even though you as a player were kind of giving these arbitrary choices that really meant nothing in the long term, the way this story was written and acted, and it had like a beginning, middle, and end, and it felt like you were playing like through a really complicated and well-designed story. That, to me, is where games need to head. Like The Last of Us is probably the best example I can think of right now, in a game that the story is as engrossing as the gameplay, if not more so. And games that fail to capture that balance between gameplay and story, to me, are games like what Telltale Games does, where it's like, you know, point-and-click adventure. I couldn't care less about those games, because I'd rather watch someone play them than play them myself, because the gameplay looks awful. But like, I feel like if we were to combine in one package, so to speak, the dynamic multiplayer teamwork story objective based stuff that Titanfall and a game like The Division could possibly bring to the table in a game like Battlefield, and then the single player not be atrocious and actually have some redeeming qualities like BioShock Infinite, and like that, like BioShock Infinite's story should be the crowning achievement that everyone looks to and tries to aspire to become or recreate or do better than. And so I feel like if you combine all those things as one package, you'd get a much better next-gen experience. Like, it would truly be a next-generation experience if Battlefield had that team play dynamic that really was more of the core focus of the game over just getting kills.
Right. when you mentioned Titanfall, how you have the you have the AI running along with you at the same time on both teams. That I think another avenue to take. So like I really liked your points about the story and kind of mixing it with story and objectives. I'm wondering, like, a game I'm really excited about is of course Star Wars Battlefront, which DICE is making. I'm a little worried about its launch, but I'm excited for it because I can really see some potential there. I don't think they're going to reach it, but if I was the game designer, this is basically what I would want to happen, and that is, if you've played the original Battlefront games, they weren't multiplayer. There was just you and then all your AI team against a gigantic enemy AI team, and it made for really cool battles because they were big. They had the scale for that, at least for that generation. So what I think for me, I kind of actually see scale being a big thing for next gen, and I think what I would do with Battlefront is, you have your ground battles, and like Titanfall, you have your friendly AI and the enemy AI on the other team. So you already have a very big ground battle going on. Now, as you know, Battlefront is all about as well the spaceship battles.
Yes.
Right? Now, in the first two Battlefront games, those were two separate things. Now, for me, I think it would just blow my mind if not only do you have AI on the ground shooting people, whatever, and being infantry, you also have AI spaceships up at this sort of mid-level, which is like just above you, which is what Battlefield has kind of already, just without AI. But you have, your jets, and so those would be your, what are they called? The A fighters, I think. Like they're I don't remember my Star Wars.
You mean X-wing?
A-wing.
Yeah, no, I think the A-wings are the ones that would like kind of, they were more closer, more inner orbit rather than outer.
Oh, you're talking about the ones on Hoth, right? The snow.
Oh yeah. So those are like speeder things, stuff like that, right? So Battlefield kind of has that, but imagine throwing AI into that as well, but then also being able to say fly up a little bit higher, and then you have your two bases, your two gigantic cruisers that are just kind of facing off against each other above the battlefield, and to sort of be able to like go up into there and take out objectives inside these ships.
Yes.
As being like another way to sort of win the battle. I think to me that would blow my mind, and I'd hope that they could do it with Battlefront. So take what makes Battlefield good and have your let's say we'd limit it to 32 players, right? So have that on each team, and then but then of course add the AI in, which is something like Titanfall is doing, and then add that scale of being able to have your infantry battles, your sort of aerial battles, and then go up even a little higher, into space. They would have to scale it. They would have to make it like so you don't actually go into space, because that would take too long to get there, but whatever. Like,
well, they just make it so that the transition isn't a loading screen.
Yeah, exactly. So you have all that in one battle. That would kind of blow my mind. And with that, of course, you could add objectives. Like you could they'd be capture points, say, on the ground. They'd be maybe another 2 capture points in the air, and then another 2 capture points in these 2 ships. And then, of course, capturing a ship, you could gain extra benefits or whatever. I don't know. But I'm looking forward to that. I don't think they're going to reach that. I really think that's going to happen. Maybe with the power of the Xbox One's cloud, they'll be able to use AI.
Well, one of my things is I feel like having AI in-game in multiplayer matches, even if it's just like team deathmatch or domination, whatever, standard game mode, I feel like having some AI teammates and not bots. We're not talking about like, the Gears of War bots here. We're talking about like AI that is separate from what your team is trying to accomplish, but it still plays a minor role in you accomplishing your objective. So if you do some research into Titanfall, you'll see what we're talking about. But it would be really nice if this AI could teach new players or players that are lazy, like, hey, if you help play the objective, you're much more likely to win and get more kills and, you know, do sorts of things, and, you know, lead by example. And I feel like that's one of the problems with Battlefield and most first-person shooters in general, is that every role is up to random players. And,
right.
you know, there are a lot of roles to play, especially in Battlefield. Like, there's the tank guy who he kind of pushes in, and like in Rush, on any map where it's hard for the defenders to take a set of NCOMs on Rush, all you have to do is get a couple pieces of armor, like, you know, your tank and your LAV, up into the objective area, and have them start pushing back the enemy team just a little bit into their spawn, and then you just flood the map with infantry people, and all of a sudden those MCOMs are yours. There's nothing the enemy team can do because you've pushed them back far enough. And it's one of those things where it's like, if there was an AI component to the game that showed you, hey, if you do this, boom, instant win. I feel like, so I was playing a match on the China Rising maps today, and we were playing Rush, and we were down to like 5 tickets, and we got both A and B planted, and I was like, and we secured A, we planted it, and then me and another squad mate, we went to B, and we planted that objective, and of course I got wiped out, and then just as I was about to spawn on him to help him defend the objective, he got wiped out. But in the meantime, not even paying attention, I guess, to the fact that we'd planted both MCOMs and we're now down to 0 tickets and needed both MCOMs to go off simultaneously in order to continue playing. Our team was still defending A, even though there was no enemies trying to take it, and they were all focused on B. So of course, as soon as I spawn in with my XM25, I start lighting up B, and I yell, "Look at B. We have A. Look at B." Our entire squad, because we have VoIP now, thank God, although it being team VoIP would be good. My entire squad, at the same exact time, as soon as I said that, looked at B, started shooting at it, and then we lost because the enemy team had defused it in the time that it took me to respawn. So that is one of the fundamental issues with these games, is that players, they don't know how to think ahead, and they don't know how to evaluate what's going on in the battlefield in a dynamic way, because there's nothing saying, hey, look, your team has both MCOMs planted, you're down to 1 ticket, you should probably be paying attention to both objectives at the same time. And so it all comes down to like teamwork and communication with the individual players, but not every player has a mic. You know, not every player is good at communicating. And to me, something that fixes that issue will earn the title of a next generation title.
You definitely touch on a good point there. I remember, I mean, this past generation, the Xbox 360, and even now, not as many gamers use voice communication. Obviously, we don't have the option of keyboard typing like PC players do. But even though, you know, I remember, and again, I hate to allude to this, I'm sorry, but back in Halo 2, when voice chat was first prominent and everybody was using it, like you would kind of razz or kind of haze the new players, but not so much. It would be like it wouldn't exactly be detrimental to them. Like you were kind of showing them the ropes of how to play the game. Like, why the fuck are you taking the sniper rifle and hiding behind a rock somewhere and not using it to help us, you know, get cover, you know, shit like that. When people aren't using voice communication, that problem kind of proliferates a bit more. You mentioned Titanfall. I am slightly optimistic that that game will find a way to get players to be more objective minded as opposed to you know, focusing on their kill death ratio. But even a game like Battlefield even has, you know, things in place like that, like capture the objectives, the game will end sooner, your team will win. They do they already do things, but yet people find a way to somehow turn it into a deathmatch. And it's a combination of they don't know better and people just not using voice communication to kind of get the point across, like, hey, this isn't like you know, there's a certain way to play it. You don't have to play it exactly the way that I think you should play it, but you kind of need to improve and just not just run out in the open or just focus on kills or just camp with this gun, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so many issues can crop up in capture the flag games and so, like they capture the flag or conquest or rush, people still somehow turn it to focus on their kill death ratio. I think Titanfall, in order to overcome that issue, they kind of need to just get rid of kills, assists, deaths on the leaderboards, or make them so obscure like they're like a third page statistic. I think they should focus on score per minute, and I think they should focus on total score as opposed to your kills and your deaths. Like, guys, who cares if a guy is a bullet sponge and his kill death ratio is 0.33, as long as he's capturing objectives and being useful to the team. It shouldn't be like a label like, oh my god, you can't get kills. It should be, well, he's a good team player who can, it'd just be like a laugh, like, man, this guy dies a lot, but he's a useful team player because he's helping the team succeed. And not enough game, whether it's lack of voice communication or what have you, there's definitely more that can be done to help advance that for console players at the very least.
So we're actually coming up on the end of the episode, but I wanted to close with something that I think will kind of maybe not give insight into how we could solve the problem, but could at least open up a discussion about what the problem actually is. So I've been playing a lot of single player games because I've been kind of frustrated with Battlefield, and I've noticed this trend that over the past few years, game design has become very simplistic. Like Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4, single player is a substantially different experience. Like Battlefield 3, there was actually some variety of the missions, and there was level of authenticism, and you weren't just running down a hallway the whole time.
Yeah.
And in just a couple of years, Battlefield went from a game where there was a pseudo level of authenticism where you had to kind of stay in one area and float around, but kind of were free to do what you wanted, kind of like you would in a real army situation or conflict situation, to follow this guy down the hallway even though he's calling you the leader. And I think one of the problems is that every game that is big these days has been trying to cater to the individual player to make them feel good. Everyone wants to feel special on Battlefield 4. Everyone wants to feel like they got that amazing sniper headshot, or that awesome flag cap, or that awesome defend, or they blew up that vehicle with C4. And there's this sort of emphasis on the individual player's enjoyment and success of the experience of playing the game that I think is kind of overshadowing the concept that this is actually a team-based game with an objective that you should be playing. And so I'd say that I think the problem is just as much, the players as it is the game, but that at the same time, there needs to be a game that has the balls to say, you are doing it wrong, do it this way. And I feel like one of the games that has that potential is DayZ and The Division, but we don't really know anything about those games aside from the fact that DayZ is probably going to be a much more in-depth and complicated experience than the mod was, and that The Division seems to focus on teamwork but is sort of being developed by Ubisoft and stuff. So I'm really not optimistic that it's going to be good. Which I know it sounds kind of like, but Jed, I thought it was your favorite game upcoming that you're looking forward to, and yes, it is, but I really have very little faith in a developer that has a bad track record and that I've kind of never heard of in making games like this. So, I mean, in closing, what do you guys think? Like if you had like one sentence to sum up what you guys think about teamwork in first-person shooters and how it could be fixed, what do you think?
I'll quickly say, I liked what you mentioned about, or what Tom mentioned about stats and stuff. To add to that, get rid of things like assignments that, make you get headshot ribbons or sniper ribbons.
Right.
Because, I've been trying to get that last sniper rifle in Battlefield 4, the JS something, the Chinese one. And so what I'm doing to get that is I'm joining rush matches to sit at the back and get these long-range marksman headshots. I know I'm being a total asshole, and I know I'm not doing anything right, but I want that achievement because I'm a completionist, or that assignment. So that's what I got to do. So get rid of stuff like that, or at least make all the assignments team-oriented.
Yes.
I hate to sound like an old timer, but I have to harken back to the days of yore. As long as if we keep using voice chat, and even if we're kind of razzing the new players, I think it will ultimately help guide them along to be better players. So I think more people actually plugging in the packed in headsets, which you have no freaking excuse to not use them because they're fucking packed in.
Yeah.
Actually plug them into your controllers,
Well, hey.
use them, talk, and I think the initial shock value might suck. You know, you might be like, man, I feel like a complete loser. I'm sucking at this game. But over time, you're gonna be like one of the community. Essentially, you're kind of bonded to them. So I think if we just all went back to the ways of using voice, even like early Day of Defeat had voice in it too, and that was a team-based game. I think that would definitely help out big time in players actually playing objectives rather than focusing on kill death.
If you're an Xbox 360 owner, or Xbox One owner, then you should know that you also paid $100 extra for a Kinect, which has built-in voice. So yeah, use that.
Right, you have no excuse now.
You don't have an excuse.
All right, guys. Well, on that note, that has been episode 1 of Nightwatch. Thank you for watching or listening, and we will see you next time. Maybe new guests, maybe not. Nobody knows. See you next time. Peace out.